Hey there, welcome to Spectrum Pulse, where we talk about music, movies, art, and culture, and today it's a big one. We're going to be talking about the best albums or songs thus far in 2025. There are some years where the best albums or songs stand head or shoulders above, well, everything, where not only the quality feels self-evident, but they also feel enormous in scope or cultural presence. And I don't just mean the mainstream by that. Even if they're within a specific niche, they feel inescapable. And there are unique challenges making a list in those years. If you agree with the consensus, there's an obligation to say something fresh to distinguish your insight. If you don't, you've got the uphill battle of defending that potentially contentious point of view. So 2025 is a different beast altogether, because while I'm seeing some scattered and rather predictable overlap among favorites among critics so far, the scale feels considerably smaller. There's no overwhelming favorites, even within their scenes. And given how thoroughly the mainstream has failed to deliver quality in 2025, there's a stronger impetus to advocate for something out of left field that you think you can possibly defend. I personally prefer this. You tend to get a broader and more eclectic cross-section of top albums minus the obvious consensus, and it forces critics to do a little bit more work. But I understand if you haven't kept your ear to the ground or dug into the weirder culverts of modern music, 2025 might not have that obvious standout, or you might think that it's a bad year. You just might not have heard what some will call the best. And initially, I was in that same camp. As described, the top of the field is diffuse. I don't think there's an overwhelming favorite. And my top three could swap their order depending on the day. And even if there's so many albums primed for the second half of this year that could blow the doors off the hinges, well, they're not contenders as of yet. I haven't had the chance to review Lorde or Willie Carlisle, or a couple others lurking in my backlog from the first 6 months of 2025. This is one of my busiest years in recent memory, both online and otherwise. You'll come to see why soon enough. I'm also old enough to give myself some grace here and not overwork myself. But a flatter top of the pyramid doesn't mean there wasn't a shocking amount of great albums that were solid contenders, where I had at least 6 major cuts to make for this top 15, and even then, I think this list is decidedly all over the place. It's also worth highlighting that the genre balance is wildly askew. Yeah, I'm the guy notorious for a lot of country and hip-hop on his list, but while the former's got some somewhat respectable entries, this might be one of the best years for rap I have had the pleasure to review, carried entirely by the underground for nearly half of this list. Outside of that, well, metal's had a shockingly strong year, albeit most of it missing this list, but the larger culprit is the utter nosedive rock and pop have taken. I know I haven't gotten to everything, but it's dire out here, folks. Gotta hope the second half of 2025 makes up the slack, although given the rap albums coming, I just think hip-hop's gonna run up the score. But we have a lot to get through. Let's get started with number 15. This is easily the most recent entry on this list, and I'll admit there was some really stiff competition to get here, really down to the wire between 3 albums, and even then I've wavered on this a lot. Because while the writing is ridiculously strong, I worry the combination of my recency bias and that one glaring flaw I mentioned in my review that's hard to overlook is gonna have me questioning this down the line. Even then, a small step down from one of the best songwriters working today.
Sailing away, feeling faded and I'm not okay. Sailing alone, staring by the stars and I can't get home now.
Yeah, I guess I shouldn't be surprised that I'm really the only person on YouTube who has covered James McMurtry at length, an older singer-songwriter active for decades but never crossing over outside of very limited circles, and even then landing a lot more in country and folk and southern rock that further narrows his audience, despite the fact that he's inspired so many younger acts who are critically acclaimed today. And even then, I wouldn't really call The Black Dog and the Wandering Child his best album, notably for some of the those production hangups that feel both intentional and kind of an odd, overpowering misstep, but I also know that McMurtry is writing more for the excellent live experience, where this album's thesis statement comes in heralding that difficult connection, all that we have in the face of age, disconnection, uncomfortable empathy, and even nation states acting out of their own broad historical insecurities. I would struggle to put it among his best, especially when his last two projects were Complicated Game and The Horses and the Hounds, but I don't know, when you pair strong compositions with some of the best writing you will hear all year, leaving real greatness in his wake, it's gonna be slept on by damn near everyone. Don't make that same mistake. Check this out. Number 14. And speaking of artists who are normally among my top tier in any given year, this is the second case where I went back and forth a lot whether he would make this list. It did not take many re-listens, though, to recognize, yeah, he belonged here.
No front teeth where they all used to go, broken apart and shining. No front teeth, but a feeling I know, back where the starting line is.
It feels like a while since I've covered a Perfume Genius album proper. Some of that was the case of me sidestepping Ugly Season in 2022 because it felt weirdly incomplete without engaging with the dance component of the project. But that sense of time and distance actually feels acutely intentional on this project, intensifies its impact. Whereas 2020 album was slowly accepting comfort and love in his life, this is the project years down the line where he approaches those issues with a wider lens and more self-awareness. He knows now he's not alone in his angst, and that newfound connection allows for a more collaborative experience in composition and theme, an artistic hunger that leads to some remarkably accessible and truly terrific songs. No, it's not as intense as his run in the 2010s, and that can feel a little discombobulating listening to this given the current backlash waves in the United States, but across all the airy soundscapes and the love-struck, delirious joy, with an acceptance of what he can and cannot control, it's a note of steadying maturity that can still crack open that window of escape. If Flummox's Southern Progress is a cannonball of white-hot rage at bigotry, the last cut from this list, this was the reminder that in the connection, we still need to cling to each other even despite how transitory our lives might be. Maybe along the way, I don't know, might even be glorious. Number 13. Look, I'm not surprised that this album grew so much on me. I basically predicted that when I reviewed it, even as I would not place it among this act's best material by a considerable long shot. Seems to be the theme of the first three albums here. But if we're looking for something that meets that moment...
SOS, update the OS, he is DOA. SA, where your best, where's your breath? Might not be okay, breathe okay. He called DOC, say he on the way, gone away. Listen closely, everything is very important.
Clipping going full Afrofuturist cyberpunk, that's one thing. They're masters at building a unique soundscape, with Daveed Diggs' knotted, manic flows reinforcing more melodic and percussive dance grooves, deeply entrenched in a computer-driven literary history that is intensely nerdy, but also acutely aware of the socio-political implications behind that outlaw nerdiness. And indeed, it's hard not to feel like they get lost a little bit in the weeds, especially with the noisier digressions and all the Easter eggs and the stuttering of the momentum, but paradoxically, it might be Clipping's most and least accessible album simultaneously, taking an intensely black and swaggering approach to sketching sharp parallels between the modern age and a dystopian future that feels stunningly relevant, and then having you want to do the work of untangling all the metatext of the stories and memory that fashion-leaning structures and corporations would rather erase, a challenge to the morals of supporting compromised legality when history, liberation, and memory, they're truly the keys. On some level, I would argue it works better in chunks than as a whole, and even then, the secret intro is kind of necessary to fully unpacking it, at least to me. But if you're tuning into a Dead Channel Sky, you'll definitely find that right way forward. And now, as per usual, I've got a selection of songs that are from albums that are not making this list but deserve a lot of attention. And buckle up, folks, you might be in for a few big surprises and swings here. From The Human Fear, Tell Me I Should Stay by Franz Ferdinand.
Tell me I should
Neon Signs by the Weather Station.
On the line and flash of lost love, like it's almost the same as love.
From Goyard Abin Said, featuring McKinley Dixon, The Apple That Scarcely Fell by Gais Guevara.
Image, genetic precision, la familia. Every single promise feeling more like a threat. I understand, but I can never forget. Numb to what we succumb, and every damn death felt familiar. Splitting image, genetic precision, la familia.
From Hurry Up Tomorrow, Without a Warning by The Weeknd.
Even when the world wants me to fail, the crowd will scream my name. Whoa, whoa.
From Pathway to the Moon, Departure, Everlasting Dream by Unrequited. From Love and Hyperbole, Clearly by Alessia Cara.
Closing in, and we're closer, and I see the fences mending slowly. Can we reopen? Forget about the rest and start over. For the first time I can see you clearly.
And now we are back to the list proper here, number 12. One thing I've realized looking over this list is that you can really notice the split between the dense, challenging, and visceral projects that demand a lot of thought and action in their wake, and some of the projects that might take more of an edge off, at least to a point, provide their own form of solace. And while I thought this was kind of great at the time, this falls in the latter, and I truly did not expect that it would hold up for so well for so long. Yeah, this is the sort of album I wish Jamie XX could have dropped last year. Very much indebted to the classics of IDM, downtempo, breakbeat, garage, and even house, but where 256 Pi strikes gold is refinement, balance, impeccable sequencing, with enough sprawl to develop its ideas and feel cinematic, but never to the point of testing my patience or feeling indulgent, even in some of the textural swerves that don't actually quite land for me. It's the student who really understands the assignment so goddamn well that the teacher looks at their own work and kind of tugs at their collar, knowing that they should well be in this category and outperforming. I mean, for homegrown music from a peer of mine on this platform, full disclosure, I did not expect this to have the polish and staying power it has. But yeah, this can hang with any of the best electronic music of 2025 so far. It's an album that builds its own earnest stage and then challenges you to meet it there. Perhaps not the most challenging music of its type in 2025, but a perfect sort of comfort. Again, it was slept on. I'm not surprised, but it shouldn't be. Number 11. I'll freely admit I didn't get to as many acts discovered on Bandcamp this year as I would have liked to have. Part of that is real life circumstances. I'm actually going to be moving very soon, and when you've got your condo staged for sale, the less collapsible streaming setup has to get packed away. Rest assured the series will resume in a couple of months, just stay tuned. But there are two acts I found on that series that made this list, although in this case, quite frankly, there's no excuse why I didn't get to him earlier.
I have an even better lover, baby, you come down, baby, you come down. Get your immortality and baby, you come down, baby, you come down to Eden now. I am what he'll be drinking. I'm a spring cup to his lips, slip into my ellipses.
Bath's Guts feels like the fleshy, jagged, tactile response to Perfume Genius's winsome soundscapes, bringing all of that shuddering intensity to the forefront, reveling in carnal, queer hookups amidst every quaking cascade of synth and Will Weisenfeld's quivering voice. But there's also more than that, where the light that casts everything in sharp contrast also exposes more the tender desire for relationships and how they dance alongside society's acceptance or lack thereof, and what that means for someone just trying to live where that itself could be radical. The juxtapositions are raw and roiling, but also deeply intentional. If there are contradictions between his thoughts and his actions, well, that's what happens when your gut overrules common sense and good ideas, and a courage denied leaps to the forefront. It's easily Bath's most accessible and joyful album to date, and if there's a year where queer folks needed that in spades, it was here. If Glory was understanding comfort, Gut is challenging it, leaping into the brink. It's wildly colorful and entertaining. I think you'll be satisfied. Number 10. So we're about to get into a lot of rap on this list, a lot of which goes to very strange places where even if the mainstream shouldn't balk at it, they would. And indeed, I think this is probably the most accessible album on this list, maybe one or two, although this one would win out stateside. But if I was looking to zoom in on my comfort zone listen...
Pistol pop, gunshot. Today I pray for you. Balls in my word, all I got. I won't break them for you. Don't stop, don't stop. Why would he ever do it? Granny said he'll be good. Yeah. You ain't gotta tell me twice. She called.
For years, I have struggled to get into Saba. I remember liking Care For Me and Few Good Things, but between the long shadow of his influences and the feeling that they should cut a little bit deeper than they do, I was left waiting for that true knockout punch. And this also is not that, but No ID gives Saba his best selection of beats possibly ever and reinforces a smooth, comfortable backdrop for him to drop bars, knowledge, and musings about working in community. It's grounded but also very contemporary. It lets him flex a low-key sense of humor that reminds me of Little Brother or J. Cole at his loosest and most tolerable. It's deep in culture with serious questions about how much his success has really mattered if he can't give back to that community, especially given his audience that bonded to him thanks to challenging moments of intimacy that are difficult to re-explore. The stakes feel smaller and breezy, but it's in those little moments where the resonance strikes, and Saba and No ID letting us in on their conversation makes for a note-perfect hangout vibe that is remarkably charming. I did not expect this would have the staying power it did in 2025, but man, I'm glad that this private collection went public. And now back onto a selection of a couple more songs from albums that did not quite make this list. Fair warning for some pop swerves, that genre certainly had better individual songs than albums, as one might expect. But before we quite get there, from Oh, the Ocean, Kate Moss by the Wombats.
Seem to find this mayhem. And you look like Kate Moss from back in 1993, when I thought my serenity was self-sustaining.
From Salvation, Twist the Knife by Rebecca Black.
Never turn away. I would rather burn myself alive, dancing till
From Here Be Dragons, Avalon by Avantasia. From Mayhem, How Bad Do You Want Me by Lady Gaga.
you hear my name, 'cause she's in your brain, and I'm here to kiss you in real life. About to cause a scene. How bad do you want me?
From Alter Ego, featuring Doja Cat and Ray, Born Again by Lisa.
When I showed you to the light, every single night, to be born again, baby, to be born again.
And from Sharon Van Etten and the Attachment Theory, Idiot Box by Sharon Van Etten and the Attachment Theory.
Call me out when you see the signs, disconnect and recognize that you know.
And now, back onto this list, number 9. So remember when I was mentioning Bandcamp acts and also how rock has had a really rough year and I had to go looking in places that I did not expect? Well, yeah, this is what I think.
Can you feel it coming? Can you? I'm on the edge, I'm on the edge, I'm on the edge of nothing.
So I get why some might dismiss Floodlights, as on first listen, they might seem like the sort of indie rock act that can't quite get past Bandcamp for a wider global audience. The production's not top tier, they're still trying to define their sound, and I miss some of the charged political edge that really characterized their early work. But Underneath represents the moment where they get both bigger and smaller simultaneously. More introspective about their newfound success, the struggle to remain optimistic in the current world and the industry that would crush them underfoot for any of that insecurity. So they ramped up their sound to their strongest compositions to date that have that anthemic go for broke feel that I love from any Australian indie rock act that's influenced by both The Killers and Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds. If you were disappointed by Sam Fender's album this year, and let's be real, you really should have been, talk about a wildly overhyped singer-songwriter project, I really still don't care for it. Yeah, Floodlights are the real goddamn deal. They might have gone Underneath, if only to crest through the water and then reach for the stars. Number 8. So this is the other more commercial album that I think made this list, although the more I think about it, the more I hear an artist whose faith in the commercial institutions and the politics behind them is intensely shaken, damn near betrayed. It's an album named for the flower that can grow on muddy waters. It's her angriest project to date. I don't know. I think it also might be her best.
Paranoia got me looking out the window. Mood might change depending on how the wind blow. When I was young, no one told me health ain't always physical. Looking around, I ain't no different from my kinfolk. I pray we heal with words, who jobless no man can curse. I pray that I'm a vessel when I stay giving all I've learned. Self-love means putting me first, the greatest love story on earth.
Look, when I said that Little Simz could afford to get away from Inflow and his influence on her sound, I was not predicting everything that went down the past year or so, but Lotus is everything she needed to rebound with fury. Beautifully, brutally cutting words, some of her most flavorful bars, and singing as the stakes feel all the more precarious, backed up with production and beats that are going to take more risks and venture further away from respectability, and she's all the better for it, surrounded by her most guest stars who not only acquit themselves well, but provide her the community to back her up in this struggle, this fight. Where her introspection increasingly felt antisocial before, kind of losing me, this is where the risk of her vulnerability feels palpable, where in confronting the hard limits of law and order, her drums have to beat the loudest, and they do so with some of her best ever songs. I know I'm in the minority for not loving the opulent grandeur of Sometimes I Might Be Introvert, but to quote someone else who is obviously on this list, I don't want to go see Nas with an orchestra at Carnegie Hall. I kind of feel the same with Little Simz finding her truth on the other side, and even though I know there's some implications there, I do think it's led for better art. Her fight is far from over, but this is a knockout punch if there was ever one I've heard one. I'd pay for this match. Number 7. If y'all can't tell, I would struggle to say there's a lot of fun albums on this list. 2025 has not exactly been a fun year for music, mainstream or otherwise. And on some level, I'm not sure this fits in that category either. Or at the very least, it's a very unique brand of fun. But if there's an album that has me wondering if this artist could be in a new golden age.
Pseudo callus is active and moving callous. Anomaly in the algorithm. To the algebraiculus. I'm all of Alexandria's information in aggregate. Ruling elder giving you the hell that melt the valuables. Rivens's grid at my back, I'm in the diagonals. Evolving, shivering his back, he shattered the manacles. Man down, damn it, can he manage the variables? Manually override these overnight a manual.
Yeah, I'm not kidding about that either. Aesop rock's been prolific as all hell in the 2020s, all of the albums being excellent, and yet I would say this is probably his best since the 2000s. As a whole, I think I might put it above Skeleton and The Impossible Kid. But what makes Black Hole Superette exceptional, beyond the intensely flavorful rap and flows, and perhaps Aesop Rock's best ever produced beats, and the great guest features spanning Billy Woods to Open Mike Eagle, the Lupe Fiasco, is how much it embraces more surreal emotion in his dogged underground hip-hop artistic quest. Less quantifiable, more qualifiable, but only from a certain point of view if you catch his wavelength, amidst systems that want to quantify everything, put it all in a box. Not the first project on this list about bucking against any established order to chase an admittedly rougher and more precarious path, but in today's world, how can you do anything else? Overstuffed with the best kind of wry personality, Aesop Rock opens up a store between worlds and dares us to bite into that truly everything bagel. You might find yourself a little surprised where it could take you. And now on to another slate of songs from albums that missed this list, and buckle up, it could get a bit wild. From A Flame in the Dark, Blue Star by Corinne. From Forever How Long, For the Cold Country by Black Country New Road. From Fuck You, Skrillex, You Think You're Andy Warhol, But You're Not, Voltage by Skrillex.
You gotta believe there's something more.
From Portrait of My Heart, Love Ray Eyes by Spelling. From Send a Prayer My Way, Bottom of a Bottle by Julian Baker and Torres.
We're fishing me out the bottom of a bottle.
And from Forever Is a Feeling, featuring Hosier, Bullseye by Lucy Dacus.
Grand prizes, young love, it was dumb love, holding each other so tight we got stuck.
So we're well over halfway through, let's get to number 6. Another theme I've noticed in some albums on this list is coming out the other side. Maybe a little scarred or worse for wear, but you're beyond the brink, and there's a new and uncertain path ahead of you, possibly more complicated. Sometimes it leads to contentment, sometimes you have to leap off that next bridge, but sometimes you get this.
Back the fuck up! Back the fuck up! Back the fuck up! Back the fuck up!
Full disclosure, I wasn't sure how Backxwash was going to follow her industrial metal trilogy of the early 2020s, that industrial rap metal fusion, and thus her choice to embrace more heartfelt melody and eclectic hip-hop production only shows more experimental versatility from one of the most challenging rappers working today. And I mean challenging beyond the sound or the production or delivery, but in the emotional themes and framing. She might be past the brink for now, but that allows for more introspection and analysis, a wider view of her vices, her insecurities, and those who care about her responding to her and them appearing in her art. She survived, but living might just be harder. But this is one of those albums that feels so intensely human in all of that vulnerability, where she's aware of the abyss and stared into it, but there's enough things and people and community that are giving her reason to stay, even if it's just a new video game, even despite what is arrayed against her, and there's really so much. Of all the queer art I've experienced this year, this often feels the most harrowing, but also offers the most promise and hope despite it all, where whenever I had a question of whether this was worth placing so high on this list, a single listen would convince me it's not even worth asking, because there's so much more than dust that remains. Number 5. Yeah, this is the album I think so many of us saw coming, especially if you were in the know. And that is interesting because it's also art that interrogates the artist's own career and how life forces a different reckoning. And for one of my all-time favorite singer-songwriters, yeah, one hell of a reckoning indeed.
And I was a gravel weed and I needed you to raise me. I'm sorry the day came when I felt like I was raised. And now that I live to see my melodies betray me, I'm sorry the love songs all mean different things today.
I go back to what I said with Lil Simz and Inflow. Even if I could have seen it coming, I wouldn't have wished it on the artist, the person. And Jason Isbell's second divorce, this time to fellow acclaimed and complicated artist in her own right, Amanda Shires, leads to one of the messiest albums of his career. And given that it's all just acoustic guitar, that says something. So Foxes in the Snow might be emblematic of splashes of red across the white, moving stains that he can't easily wash away. But when you've spent multiple albums exploring the difficulties of your marriage, the album made as it finally fails, even as he might find the hope of new love again, with the framing giving him no quarter to his own mess, as even some of his best ever songs take on new meaning with heartbreaking context. Yeah, this one cuts deep. And I wasn't sure it was gonna totally stick. A pure acoustic album, even with a player as skilled as Jason Isbell, has the risk of feeling formulaic or running together, and it's a masterclass of songwriting that it really doesn't. Even if he's running, it's not with his eyes closed anymore. I don't think this will ever be anyone's favorite Jason Isbell album when Southeastern or Something More Than Free or Weather Vanes exist. It's ragged and transitory. It's the most killing of one's idol I have ever seen. But if there's a time to be brave, I think it's here. Number 4. This is my favorite artist I've discovered in 2025. Arguably, I should have been onto him last year, and given his speed of output, he may be burned out or trying my patience by the end of 2025. But hey, let's try meeting in the middle, shall we?
We'll keep spinning on. Turn and turn me on. We'll keep spinning on.
You know, in a different time, every critic I know would be screaming the praises of Jesse Wells as that next big folk singer-songwriter who utterly captures the zeitgeist, and where sounding like Bob Dylan is as much of a blessing as it is a curse. And even then, I know some old fans that will say Patchwork from last year is better. But Middle is the first album where I hear production refinement, thematic focus, and some truly stunning self-composed songwriting. Like Isbell, his framing is wide-angle and uncompromising to both his own messy emotions post-breakup, but also a very complicated world that can't be easily contextualized, made all the more disquieting given how his nasal voice and cutting words take less of an approach of compromise and more just bleeding everyone, especially those who are grifting in the meantime. But it's also excellently produced and sequenced. The writing is vibrant with wild and intensely memorable detail, asking to accept the mosaic of difference and then painting it across many stripes of country and folk, and where I can still tell he's got so much more to say. I don't know if that rumor that he's gonna drop again this summer with a full album is actually true. He already aggregated 63 more songs into a demo package that dropped a month or so back. He's just that prolific, especially with TikTok. But you know, if he continues to find time to temper that formula, find that voice that spans the times that are changing, ooh yeah, this could be special. Also issue vinyl at some time, that'd be really nice. But now, the final list of songs from albums that didn't make this list, and yeah, there are some doozies here. Starting off with, from Lonely People with Power, Body Behavior by Death. From Tunnel Vision, Clueless by Beach Bum.
Different names. Was it perfect? Was it simple? Was it more or less the same? How did it change? How did I change? How did it change? How did I change? How did I?
From The Scholar, Fires, CCF, I'm Gonna Stay With You by Car Seat Headrest. From Who Will Look After the Dogs, Needed to Hear It by Pup. From Pirouette, Departures by Model Actress.
Embodied, be embodied well. Anywho, be embodied well. Anywho.
From Phantom Island, Dead Stick by King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard. From Winged Victory, a little bit of a teaser here, Big Butt Billy by Willie Carlisle.
I'd ever get those tiny little britches on. Well, good God Almighty, hell Satan, I've never seen a finer they them than Big Butt Billy.
And yeah, the final three. And again, catch me on a different day, they could all be well in a different order. Number 3. The problem with artists that are so remarkably consistent in their thorny density is that it can really take time to fully untangle their emotional weight and impact. That kind of works against me as a critic. With this artist in particular, I had to do a serious reconsideration of where I would place his best projects in any kind of hierarchy. And hell, maybe that's the paratext, break any ranking or hierarchy with a sickening crack, again challenging the quantifiable. So while I will not say this is Billy Woods' best album now,
Fanon said self-amputation, how all this is created, the irrational rationalizations of the racists. The amputee says accepted, there's no escaping, except the prosthetics. They give ill-fitting limbs as gifts and insist you can only live in the present.
I stand by the assertion that I like Billy Woods solo more than Arm & Hammer, or at the very least has more albums that in 20 years or so might well be considered classics. History Will Absolve Me, Hiding Places, Maps, I would put Church there even as everyone else peaks Ethiops, and I reckon for many, this will be there too, easily one of Billy Woods' most harrowing projects to date in the high-concept horror. But while there's references to vampires and zombies and racist doll caricatures, they are all largely metaphorical for the humanity severed to survive, where amputation becomes its own nightmare fuel. Insert that scene from Heavy Rain right here. What's grisly about this album, beyond its wildly varied and challenging production, and how Billy Woods wrests language away from the colonizers to render everyone uncomfortable, is how deeply human it is in doing so. Who is afforded empathy? The cultures that misuse power when no pedestal is safe, and when the stakes are so high, and how you must provide then for your family and kinfolk. What sacrifices are you forced to make? If it didn't feel so crushingly cliche and obvious, I'd call this album the equivalent of Ryan Coogler's Sinners, and how it utilizes horror tropes in music to interrogate black struggles, compromises, and how much of your own soul you're willing to sell. Except Billy Woods is giving even less quarter to those whose mascara doesn't run. Utterly harrowing, one of his best, where you don't even need to hear about that accursed doll so much to be constantly looking over your shoulder. And for good reason. Number 2. I said earlier that this list isn't exactly full of a lot of fun music, and by extension I also include albums where on sound and melody alone I was blown out of the water with euphoria. Again, it doesn't feel like that kind of year, at least the past 6 months. There was one absolutely huge exception. Yeah, this might be Saor's best album, at least in the same tier of the mid-2010s run, where if they were striking a balance between black metal and Celtic folk, this is them amplifying that fusion to new heights. The thunderous crescendos, the grand choral arrangements, the howling bagpipes and tin whistle that feels like you're transported straight to the Scottish Highlands and then soaring above the green. I would struggle to say lyrically this is the band's best. I can only praise themes that consistently look to the past and that same history and folklore for restoration for so long, but when the melodies and riffs go so goddamn hard, they are damn near undeniable. Paired with some of their strongest hooks possibly ever, yeah, this is the height of Caledonian metal, and if there is something that helps that spirit soar in 2025, for me, it was this. Absolutely worth the shot. But finally, number 1. Gonna be brutally honest, there is a nitpicky part of me that did not want to put this album at the top. Not because it's undeserved, but because it's obvious. Every critic worth their salt has praised this to hell and back, and for damn good reason. Even though in my case, I have heard this artist do better in the past. I should know. I was one of the first people on this platform to say it. But at the end of the day, this list has been characterized by looking back a few years removed from the very brink, a high concept that can't easily be quantified, and utterly life-affirming in the embrace of art, community, that blazing light, let's call it truth. Because this was the apotheosis.
I got a blanket with me in the riding. I'll make it so my niggas never dying. Maybe escape if we take the skies in. I got a blanket with me in the riding. I'll make it so my niggas never dying. Maybe escape if we take the skies in.
If the coming out party for McKinley Dixon was a couple of years ago, this is where it felt like he could no longer be denied. Taking his wildly colorful live jazz rap, which demands only the best flows to ride it, and then interweaving with the concept of black children discovering the magic of resurrection. And yet somehow within a blazingly tight package, he crams in so many ideas under that hot and humid summer sun. What immortality does for someone of the streets with nothing to lose and everything to gain, what it means for those who wield that magic and the messy emotions of drawing it forth and actual consequences, how it sunders forth any concept of afterlife and religion and then challenges on whose morality anyone gets on and goes further. And all of that is entangled in heavier metaphors of art as memorial, how all of it gets commodified extant of community, and how all of it is wrapped in a sense of play, where imagination runs free and wild until the sidewalk ends. So many albums on this list made themselves unquantifiable through abstraction or the weirdest of swerves. Whereas McKinley Dixon, it's the density. He simply overloads his ideas with so many layers that so few can even scratch the surface of references. He's a craftsman who is only somehow further purifying his art, where my biggest complaint is that there very easily could have been more to all these stories and a more deliberate pace. That's a thin complaint indeed. Now, I might personally prefer For My Mama and Anyone Who Looked Like Her from 2021 for its more deliberate pacing and slower spots and the sprawl, but I also know I'm in the minority at this point. And in a year where we still have albums coming from Open Like Eagle, Nourished by Time, Rustin Kelly, Kesha, Jid, La Dispute, Tyler Childers, Amaray, Ethel Cain, and the return of goddamn Clips, yeah, this'll still be hard to beat. Best album of 2025 so far. Let's keep that magic alive, y'all. You know what to do. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. If you want to see more, please be sure to like, share, drop comments, subscribe. Oh my god, this was tough to assemble. When you have a camera that's constantly overheating as you're trying to put together a longer video, that's a bit of a struggle. Beyond that though, if you guys have any comments and want to leave your list down there below, have fun, enjoy the comments. Beyond that though, anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation, I'm all ears. And if y'all want to get involved in helping support the channel, add albums to my schedule when I reopen it in a week or so, or hell, I don't know, just, yell at me on my Discord, link to my Patreon and YouTube memberships is right over there. Don't feel obligated, tough times, I understand, but the option's available. Till then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.